A poor little girl looks at a restaurant on Christmas and says to her mother, "They eat every day, and we don't always have food. Will that ever change?" A young billionaire hears her and does something unbelievable. Nate adjusted the knot on his tie for the third time as he walked down the sidewalk. The golden late afternoon light hit the windows of the restaurant in front of him, reflecting the city that never stopped. Another night, another dinner alone. At 30, he had built a small but solid empire. His financial consulting firm grew each month. Clients trusted him, and his bank account proved his success was real. But success, he discovered, had a bitter taste when savored alone. The Italian restaurant was his Thursday refuge, a table for one, always the same one in the corner, where he could watch families dining together without seeming intrusive. The waiter already knew his order: mushroom risotto, a glass of red wine, and loneliness served as a side dish. Nate stopped in front of the glass door, took a deep breath, and was about to enter when he heard a small, clear voice cutting through the street noise. "They eat every day, and we don't always have food to eat." He turned. About 15 feet away, a little girl of maybe 5 was sitting on a low wall, swinging her little legs as she looked through the restaurant window. Beside her, a young woman held a worn-out tote bag. "Do you think this will ever change?" The child's voice carried a pure curiosity, without a hint of bitterness, as if she were asking when it would stop raining. Nate felt a strange pang in his chest, a twinge he couldn't explain. The woman, who must have been her mother, ran a hand through the girl's brown hair with a tenderness that spoke louder than any words. "It will, Emmy. One day, it will. Emmy." The name echoed in Nate's mind as he watched the scene. The girl wore a light blue dress that must have been pretty once, but was now faded and had a small tear at the hem. Her white sneakers had holes on the sides, yet she smiled as she pointed at the people walking by. "Look, Mommy, that man has a suit just like in the cartoons." The mother followed her daughter's gaze, and her eyes met Nate's. He saw the immediate embarrassment on her face, a woman who couldn't be older than 25, with delicate features that hunger hadn't yet managed to completely erase. "Sorry," she murmured, getting up quickly. "Emmy, let's go." "But why?" The girl jumped off the wall. "He seems nice." Nate stood motionless, watching their interaction. There was something about that family that captivated him. Maybe it was the contrast. Him with his $1,000 suit, about to have dinner alone in an expensive restaurant, and them, visibly struggling, yet radiating a warmth he hadn't felt in years. The mother took Emmy's hand, ready to leave, but the girl pulled away and walked up to Nate. "Are you going to have dinner in there?" she asked, pointing to the restaurant. "Emmy?" The mother approached, clearly mortified. "I'm sorry, sir, she's very curious." Nate knelt to be at the girl's eye level. "I am. What about you? Have you had dinner yet?" "Not yet," Emmy answered honestly. "Hey, but Mommy said we're going to eat at home." The look the mother gave her daughter was loaded with meaning. Nate got the message. There was no home, and probably no dinner either. "You know," he said, still looking at Emmy, "I was going to have dinner by myself. Would you like to keep me company?" The silence that followed was heavy. The mother opened her mouth to refuse. He could see the no forming on her lips, but Emmy jumped with joy. "Can we, Mommy, please?" "No, we can't bother the gentleman." Her voice was low but firm. "It's no bother." Nate stood up, looking directly at her. "My name is Nate, and honestly, I'd love the company." A silent battle played out on the woman's face. Pride versus need, dignity versus hunger. Nate saw the exact moment when need won. "Amber," she said finally, extending her hand. "And this is Emmy. It's a pleasure to meet you both." The inside of the restaurant was exactly as Nate remembered. Soft lights, low instrumental music, tables with white tablecloths and lit candles. The smell of garlic and basil hung in the air, but this time, as the waiter escorted them to the table, everything felt different. "Table for 3, the waiter asked, surprised. Nate always dined alone. "Yes, please." Emmy was fascinated by everything. She touched the tablecloth with reverence, as if it were made of silk. When the waiter lit the candle in the center of the table, she clapped her hands. "It's just like in the movies," she exclaimed. Amber remained tense, sitting on the edge of her chair as if ready to flee at any moment. Nate noticed how she observed every detail of the room, memorizing it, perhaps saving this moment to revisit later. "What would you like to eat?" Nate asked, handing them the menus. Emmy browsed hers seriously, furrowing her brow in concentration. "There's a lot of stuff I don't know what it is. How about I order a few options and you can try them?" "That would be perfect," Amber said softly. Nate ordered a varied selection: pasta with tomato sauce for Emmy, mushroom risotto to share, a fresh salad, and garlic bread. Nothing too elaborate, but enough for a decent meal. The waiter also brought ice water and orange juice for Emmy, who held the glass with both hands as if it were a treasure. "Can I drink it all?" she asked her mother. "Of course, sweetie." While they waited, Emmy told him about her favorite doll, which was in her mother's bag. The doll's name was Lucy, and she had yellow hair that she always combed before bed. "She's my best friend," Emmy explained. "When I have nightmares, she protects me." "What kind of nightmares?" Nate asked, genuinely curious. "Sometimes I dream I'm lost and can't find Mommy, but then Lucy shows up and shows me the way." Amber held her daughter's hand for a moment, and Nate noticed her eyes glistening slightly. "Emmy has a very strong imagination," Amber said. "She makes up stories all the time." "I like to draw too," Emmy added. "I draw clouds because they look like cotton candy." "Have you ever had cotton candy?" "Yes, I have, a long time ago. I've never had it, but it must be delicious, sweet like a cloud." The food arrived, and Emmy's eyes went wide. The plate of pasta steamed in front of her, and she looked at her mother as if asking for permission to believe it was real. "You can eat, sweetie," Amber said softly. Emmy picked up her fork and began to eat carefully, as if she didn't want to waste a single strand of pasta. Nate watched her savor every bite, closing her eyes in pleasure. "Is it good?" he asked. "It's the best food in the world," she replied with her mouth full, making Nate smile. Amber ate in silence, but Nate noticed that she too was savoring every bite. There was a quiet gratitude in her movements, an awareness that this meal was precious. "What do you do for work?" Amber asked, trying to keep the conversation going. "Financial consulting. I help people organize their businesses, investments, things like that." "That must be interesting." "Sometimes." Nate took a bite of his risotto. "And you?" There was a pause. "Time between jobs at the moment." The answer was careful, and Nate didn't press. He was beginning to understand that their story was more complex than it appeared. "Mommy used to work at a coffee shop," Emmy offered, "but the boss was very mean." "Emmy," Amber murmured. "It's true. He yelled at everyone. And he wouldn't let Mommy take food home." Nate felt the tension build and changed the subject. "Emmy, do you go to school? I'm starting next semester." She smiled, showing a new tooth coming in. "I'm going to learn to read real books, not just the ones with pictures." "Do you know any letters already?" "I can write my name." Emmy took a napkin and, with a finger dipped in her water glass, wrote Emmy in crooked letters. "Very good," Nate applauded, and she beamed with pride. "Mommy taught me. She's very smart." Amber blushed slightly. "Emmy exaggerates." "No, I don't. You know a lot of things. You know how to make delicious food. You know how to tell stories. You know how to make different voices when you read to me." "You read to her?" Nate asked, impressed. "Sometimes we get books from the library. Emmy loves stories." "What's your favorite?" Nate asked the little girl. "The one about the ugly duckling," Emmy answered immediately, "because in the end he finds out he's beautiful, just like Mommy always tells me." The conversation flowed naturally as the evening went on. Emmy talked about the cats she saw in the park, about how she liked to watch people on the street and invent stories for them. Amber, though still reserved, began to relax slightly. "That lady always wears colorful dresses," Emmy said, pointing to a woman at the next table. "I bet she has a closet full of rainbows." "Do you have any family?" Amber asked during a pause. "No. My parents died when I was young, never married, never had kids." The answer came out rawer than he intended. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "It's okay, I'm used to it." But as he spoke, watching Emmy play with the napkins, Nate realized that maybe he wasn't as used to it as he thought. "It must be lonely," Amber said softly. Sometimes, Nate took a sip of wine. But you learn to deal with it. I work a lot. Keep my mind busy. Work isn't the same as family, Emmy said, surprising both adults with her observation. You're right, Nate agreed. It's not the same thing. The dinner came to an end faster than he would have liked. Emmy had finished all her pasta and even tried a little of every dish on the table. Her cheeks were flushed, and she seemed more alive than when they had arrived. Can I take some bread? She asked, looking at the still full basket. Of course, Nate said, wrapping some bread in napkins. Take as many as you want. Thank you, Amber said as Nate paid the bill. This was very kind. It was my pleasure. Truly. They left the restaurant together. The night was cool, and the city lights created an almost magical atmosphere. Emmy held her mother's hand and looked up at Nate. Are you married? She asked suddenly. Emmy, Amber chided. No, I'm not, Nate answered, amused by the girl's curiosity. Why, never found the right person, I guess, Emmy thought for a moment. Maybe you haven't been looking in the right places. The 5-year-old's unexpected wisdom left Nate speechless for a moment. You might be right, he said finally. They walked a few yards in silence until they reached the corner where they needed to part ways. Emmy let go of her mother's hand and approached Nate. Will we see you again? She asked with the kind of frankness only children possess. Nate looked at Amber, searching for a sign. She averted her gaze but didn't say no. He felt something stir inside him, a hesitation he couldn't explain. Maybe, he replied, and saw a shadow of disappointment cross Emmy's face. To maybe is almost a no, she said, showing a perception that surprised him. No, it's not, Nate knelt beside her. Maybe means I'd really like to, but I don't know if it will be possible. Why? Because sometimes life is complicated. Emmy studied him for a moment, then smiled. Okay. Maybe is better than never. They said their goodbyes there on the sidewalk. Nate watched as Amber and Emmy walked down the street, the little girl's silhouette bouncing beside her mother. When they turned the corner and disappeared, he stood there for a long moment. Something had changed that night. He couldn't define exactly what, but he felt as if a door had opened inside him, a door that had been locked for so long he had forgotten it existed. Nate walked to his car, but before getting in, he looked one more time in the direction they had gone. The maybe he had given Emmy echoed in his mind. Part of him wished he had been more definitive, more encouraging. For the first time in years, loneliness didn't feel like a choice. It felt like a waste. As he drove home, Nate couldn't stop thinking about Emmy's question, will this ever change? And her observation, maybe is better than never. Maybe, he thought, she was right. Maybe was the first step toward a change he didn't even know he was waiting for. What he couldn't imagine was that, on the other side of town, a 5-year-old girl was falling asleep clutching her doll Lucy, whispering a prayer. Please, make the kind man appear again. Mommy needs friends too. And sometimes, just sometimes, children's prayers have a special power to turn into reality. The key turned in the lock with the same sound as always, but when Nate pushed the door to his home open, something was different. The apartment greeted him with its usual silence, the low hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock on the wall, the almost imperceptible whisper of the air conditioning. Sounds that were once just background noise now seemed amplified, heavy. He dropped his keys on the marble entryway table and looked around. Everything was exactly as he had left it that morning. The expensive furniture in its precise places, the clean and organized surfaces, the panoramic view of the city through the 23rd floor windows. It was a home any design magazine would love to photograph, and it was completely empty. Nate loosened his tie as he walked to the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator out of habit, finding the same options as always. Imported mineral water, Greek yogurt, some leftover Chinese food he had ordered 3 days ago. He closed the door without taking anything. The echo of his footsteps on the hardwood floor resounded through the hallway. When was the last time he had noticed that sound? When was the last time the silence had bothered him this way? He threw himself onto the leather sofa, picked up the remote, and turned on the television. The day's news unfolded on the screen. Politics, economics, sports, but the words seemed distant, unimportant. He changed the channel. An action movie. Changed it again. A sitcom with a laugh track that sounded forced in the quiet room. He turned off the TV. The silence returned, heavier now. Nate closed his eyes and, unintentionally, found himself remembering Emmy's laugh when she found out she could choose anything from the menu. The way her eyes lit up when he said the garlic bread was all hers. The way Amber smiled, really smiled, when Emmy told the story of the doll Lucy for the third time. There was noise at that restaurant table, not just the voices, but something more. Life, movement, purpose. Nate got up and walked to the window. Down below, the city was bustling. Cars passed, people walked on the sidewalks, lights turned on in apartments and offices. Life was happening everywhere, and he was watching it all from a distance, protected by double-paned glass and 23 floors of separation. Maybe, he murmured to himself, remembering the answer he had given Emmy. Maybe what? That they would see each other again. That he had the courage to break the bubble he had built around his own life. That a 5-year-old girl and her mother could make a difference in the carefully controlled existence he had assembled. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. The caller ID showed the name of an important client. Nate watched the phone ring 2, 3, 4 times before it went to voicemail. For the first time in years, he didn't answer a work call. He went back to the sofa but couldn't sit still. He got up, went to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator again, closed it, walked to his office, looked at the pile of documents on his desk, turned back. What was happening to him? He took a long shower, hoping the hot water would wash away this strange restlessness. It didn't work. He lay in the king-size bed, wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets that cost more than many people earned in a month. The mattress was perfect, the room temperature was ideal, but sleep wouldn't come. He stared at the ceiling, remembering the conversation at the restaurant, Emmy asking if he had family. Amber eating slowly, savoring each bite as if it were her last. The way the girl held the juice glass with both hands, treating it like a treasure. Work isn't the same as family, she had said, 5 years old, and she already understood something that he at 30E was just beginning to grasp. Nate turned over in bed, then turned again. The digital clock read 2:30 a.m. when he finally fell asleep, but it was a restless sleep, full of fragmented dreams where he tried to find 2 silhouettes walking down dark streets. The alarm went off at 7 in the morning, as always. Nate got up, went through his automatic morning routine, shower, coffee, news on his phone, a carefully chosen suit. But when he got to the office, he couldn't concentrate. Sitting in front of the computer, looking at investment spreadsheets and financial reports, his mind wandered. Where were Emmy and Amber right now? Did they have a place to stay? Did they get breakfast? Mr. Nate. The voice of his assistant brought him back to the present. Your 10 o'clock meeting is here. Meeting? He looked at the calendar on his computer. Meeting with the Petersons about their retirement plan. An important account. Of course. Send them in. The meeting passed in a blur. Nate said the right words, made the appropriate recommendations, closed the deal. But part of him was somewhere else, at a table in an Italian restaurant, listening to a child tell stories about clouds that looked like cotton candy. Lunch came and went. Nate ate a sandwich at his desk, paying no attention to the taste. He took calls, answered emails, reviewed contracts, viewed. Everything was running perfectly in the well-oiled machine that was his professional life. But at 3 in the afternoon, he couldn't take it anymore. I'm leaving early today, he told his assistant, grabbing his jacket. But sir, you have the presentation for the... Reschedule it. He was almost at the door. Reschedule everything. On the street, Nate walked without a clear direction. His feet automatically led him toward the Italian restaurant, but he stopped before he got there. What was he doing? What did he expect to find? Still, he kept walking. He passed the restaurant, looked through the window. A few tables were occupied, waiters serving a late lunch, but no sign of Amber and Emmy. Of course not. Why would they be there? He continued down the sidewalk, observing every face, every figure that passed. A woman with a small child made his heart race for a moment, but as he got closer, he saw it wasn't them. Nate walked for over an hour, circling blocks in ever-widening rings around the restaurant. He checked the small park Emmy had mentioned, where she saw the orange cat. He scanned the bus stops, the public benches, the small shops. Nothing. He stopped at a corner, feeling ridiculous. What exactly was he doing? Searching for two people in a city of millions. People he had known for a few hours. People who probably weren't even thinking about him, but even feeling foolish, he couldn't stop. He went into a coffee shop near the park and ordered a coffee he didn't want, just to have an excuse to sit by the window and watch the street. Maybe they would pass by, maybe. The coffee grew cold on the table as he watched every person who passed on the sidewalk. Families, couples, people alone like him, but no 5-year-old girl in a faded blue dress and sneakers with holes. At 5 in the afternoon, Nate finally gave up and went home. The apartment greeted him with the same silence as always, but now he knew why it bothered him so much. For the first time in his life, he had tasted something different. Not romance, not passion. It was something simpler and more complicated at the same time. It was the feeling of mattering to someone, of making a difference in someone else's life, of not being completely alone in the world. And now that he knew what it felt like, the silence truly hurt. Nate poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat on the balcony, looking at the city lights. Somewhere down there, Emmy was probably getting ready for bed. Amber might be telling her a story, making different voices like the girl had mentioned. They were living their lives, probably not even remembering the man in the suit who had paid for their dinner the night before. But he couldn't stop thinking about them. Maybe, he said again to the night air, but this time the words sounded different, less like an evasion, more like a promise he was making to himself. Tomorrow he would go out and look again, and the day after, if necessary. Because some things, the things that really matter, are worth searching for, even when you don't know exactly where to find them. On the third day of his search, Nate had almost given up. He had walked the same streets, visited the same places, looked at the same faces. His assistant had already called 3 times asking where he was, and his meeting schedule was piling up like an avalanche he would eventually have to face. But something pulled him back to those streets, a force he couldn't explain, as if a part of him knew he had to keep looking. It was mid-afternoon when he turned the familiar corner, passing the Italian restaurant once more. His steps had already memorized the path, 30 yards to the first intersection, left onto the street with the small shops, right at the park where Emmy said she saw the orange cat. And it was there, on a bench near the park, that he saw them. Amber was sitting with Emmy beside her, and between them was a small piece of bread they were carefully sharing. It wasn't a meal. It was survival. Every crumb being used, every little piece being savored as if it were a banquet. Nate stopped where he was, watching the scene. Emmy was wearing the same blue dress from 2 days ago, now with a new stain on the sleeve. Amber's hair was in a messy ponytail, and even from a distance he could see the exhaustion in her shoulders. They were talking quietly, and he could hear snippets of the conversation on the wind. "Just one more piece, Mommy. You're hungrier than I am. No, sweetie, you need to eat to grow strong. But you need to be strong to take care of me, too." The maturity in Emmy's voice made something tighten in Nate's chest. A 5-year-old child shouldn't have to worry if her mother was eating enough. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle them. Emmy was the first to see him, her eyes lit up instantly, and she jumped off the bench. "It's him, Mommy! It's the kind man!" Emmy ran to Nate with her arms open, and he knelt to receive her. The little girl's hug was warm and desperate, as if she had been saving all that joy just for him. "I knew you'd come back," she said, pulling away slightly to look him in the face. "I told Mommy that a maybe was almost a yes." Amber approached more slowly, clearly embarrassed. Nate could see the shame in her eyes. Being found sharing crumbs of bread on a public bench was not exactly how she wanted to be seen. "Hello," she said softly, trying to smooth her hair with her hands. "Hello," Nate replied, standing up but keeping a hand on Emmy's shoulder. "How are you two?" "We're fine," Amber answered quickly. "Just resting a bit." The lie hung in the air between them. Nate looked at the piece of bread on the bench, at their wrinkled clothes, at the small bags that apparently held everything they owned. "Are you sleeping on the street?" he asked gently. The silence that followed was deafening. Emmy looked at her mother, then at Nate, then back at her mother. Amber opened her mouth as if to deny it, but the words wouldn't come out. "Sometimes," she finally admitted, her voice almost a whisper. "There's an abandoned house nearby," Emmy added, pointing in a vague direction. "Sometimes we sleep there. It has a roof that doesn't leak much." Nate felt something break inside him. Not anger, not pity, something deeper. A recognition that the world was terribly wrong when a child like Emmy had to worry about leaky roofs. "Come with me," he said, holding out his hand. "I have a safe place." Amber took a half step back. "No, we can't. We don't." "Please," Nate interrupted softly. "Not as charity. As friends. You would be my guests." "But we barely know you," Amber protested, though her voice sounded less convincing than her words. "And I don't know you," Nate agreed. "But sometimes you just know when something is right." Emmy held Nate's hand with one of hers and her mother's with the other. "It's like when you know it's going to rain before the clouds get dark," she said seriously. "You just feel it." Amber looked at her daughter, then at Nate. He could see the battle happening in her eyes, fear against hope, pride against need. "Why would you do this?" she asked. Nate thought for a moment. "Because last night I had dinner alone again, and I realized I don't want to do that anymore. Because Emmy made me laugh for the first time in months. Because—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Because some things just matter." Emmy squeezed his hand. "And because you're good," she added. Good people help good people." Amber closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and when she opened them again, there was a quiet surrender in them. "Okay," she whispered, "but just for one night." "One night," Nate agreed, though they both knew they were lying. The walk to Nate's apartment was punctuated by light conversation and comfortable silences. Emmy held his hand and pointed out interesting things she saw: a dog with very big ears, a shop window full of colorful shoes, a building so tall she had to crane her neck to see the top. "Do you live in a building like that?" she asked. "Something like it," Nate replied. "So I bet you can see the whole world from your window." When they arrived at Nate's building, Emmy was speechless. The doorman greeted them politely, but Nate noticed the curious glance he gave Amber and Emmy. Two people clearly out of place in this environment of marble and crystal chandeliers. In the elevator, Emmy asked if she could press the button. When Nate said 23rd floor, she was impressed. "That's almost in the sky." "Sometimes it feels like it," Nate murmured, and Amber looked at him with curiosity. When the elevator doors opened directly into Nate's apartment, Emmy let out a low "wow." Amber remained silent, but he could see her eyes taking in everything: the expensive furniture, the impeccable decor, the spectacular view of the city. "It's very beautiful," she said politely. "It's very big," Emmy added, dropping her bag and running to the window. "Look, Mommy!" "You can see everything." Nate watched their reaction, seeing his home through the eyes of people who didn't have one. Suddenly, everything seemed excessive. The dining table for 12 that never had guests, the living room with sofas that were rarely used, the empty bedrooms that only served to collect dust. "You must be tired," he said. "Let me show you where you can stay." He led them down the hall, opening the door to the first guest room. It was spacious and well decorated, with a queen-size bed and its own ensuite bathroom. "Emmy can stay here," he explained, then opened the door next to it. "And this one can be yours, Amber." The rooms were impeccable but devoid of personality. Nate had never noticed that before. "They're beautiful," Amber said, but he noticed how she automatically checked the locks on the doors, the escape routes, the instincts of someone who had learned to be cautious. "You must want to take a shower, rest a bit," Nate suggested. "I'm going to run out quickly to buy a few things you might need." "You don't have to," Amber began. "I want to," he interrupted her gently. At the nearest department store, Nate found himself in unfamiliar territory: children's clothes, women's pajamas, toiletries, things he had never needed to buy. He wandered the aisles, picking up items almost at random. For Emmy, pajamas with animal prints, a few colorful t-shirts, a new dress, sneakers in the right size, a small toothbrush with cartoons on it, and, on impulse, a teddy bear. For Amber, basic but good quality clothes, toiletries, comfortable slippers. He hesitated in the lingerie section, feeling like an intruder, but grabbed a few basic things. When he returned to the apartment, he found Emmy in the living room still looking out the window. Amber was beside her, and they both looked small in comparison to the space. "I bought a few things," Nate announced, setting down the bags. Emmy ran to him, curious. When she saw the teddy bear, her eyes widened. "For me? For you?" She held the teddy bear as if it were made of gold. "He's perfect. How did you know I wanted a teddy bear?" "A gut feeling," Nate smiled. Amber approached the bags, touching the clothes with reverence. "This is too much, Nate. I can't accept." "Yes, you can," he said firmly. "And you will." There was a moment of tension, then Amber nodded slowly. "Thank you," she murmured. "Why don't you take a shower first?" Nate suggested. "Emmy and I can organize her things." After Amber disappeared into the bathroom, Nate helped Emmy try on the new clothes. She paraded around the living room in each outfit, twirling so he could see. "Kat, is this dress prettier than my blue one?" she asked, comparing. "They're both pretty," Nate replied, "but what's important is how you feel in them." "I feel like a princess," she confessed, twirling again. When it was Emmy's turn to shower, she took so long that Nate started to worry. Amber knocked on the bathroom door. "Emmy, is everything okay?" "I'm playing with the bubbles," came the excited reply. "There are so many." Amber smiled, the first genuine smile Nate had seen from her. "She's never had a real bathtub," she explained softly. "Just quick showers in public restrooms." Later, when they were both clean and dressed in new clothes, Nate took them to see the tidied-up rooms. He had put out fluffy towels, extra pillows, soft blankets. Emmy's teddy bear was on the small table next to the bed. "It's like a fancy hotel," Emmy said in awe. Nate laughed. "Better than a hotel. It's your home." "Temporarily," Amber corrected quickly. "Of course," Nate agreed, but his words lacked conviction. Emmy jumped on the bed, testing its softness. "It feels like a cloud," she exclaimed, sinking into the mattress. "Mommy, come feel, it's just like a real cloud." Amber sat on the edge of the bed, running her hand over the sheets. "It's very soft," she agreed. "Do you think I can dream that I'm flying?" Emmy asked Nate. "I think you can dream of anything you want." While Emmy explored her new temporary room, Amber pulled Nate aside. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly, "about how we ended up like this." Nate waited, not pushing. "I was married," she began, the words coming out slowly. "Emmy's father, David, he drank a lot. At first it was just on weekends, then every day." She paused, looking over at where Emmy was playing. "When he died, it was a car accident. He was driving drunk. I thought maybe things would get better. But then I found out about the debts. He had lost everything gambling, had borrowed money from dangerous people. We lost the house, the car, everything." Nate felt anger grow inside him, not at the situation, but at the injustice of it. The people he owed money to. They didn't care that he was dead. They wanted me to pay. We had to run. "How long have you been on the streets?" Nate asked softly. 3 months. Her voice was almost inaudible. "Emmy thinks it's an adventure." "I let her think that." "You don't have family, friends?" Amber shook her head. "David isolated me from everyone, and my family. They never approved of him. When I married him, they said they didn't want to see me anymore." Nate processed the information. A young woman, alone, with a small child, no resources, no support. And yet, she had kept Emmy happy, protected, full of hope. "You're incredible," he said finally. Amber looked at him, surprised. "What? You kept her safe? You kept her happy? In an impossible situation, you did what you had to do." Tears welled up in Amber's eyes. "I don't feel incredible. I feel like a failure." "You're not," Nate said firmly. "You're the strongest mother I've ever met." Emmy appeared in the hallway, interrupting the moment. "Can I sleep with the teddy bear?" "Of course you can," Nate replied. "And can I play with the teddy bear before I go to sleep?" "You can play as much as you want." Emmy smiled and ran back to her room. Amber followed her. and Nate heard fragments of their conversation as she put her daughter to bed. "He's nice, isn't he, Mommy?" "Yes, he is, sweetie. I think he was lonely like us." But now, nobody's lonely. Later, when Emmy finally fell asleep holding her new teddy bear, Nate stood in the living room looking out the window. Amber joined him, both in contemplative silence. "Thank you," she said eventually, "for everything. You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do. You don't know what this means." Nate looked around his apartment. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone within those walls. There was life there now. Laughter echoing in the halls, voices chatting, the presence of people who cared about each other. "Actually," he said softly, "I think I'm the one who should be thanking you." For the first time, Nate felt that his home was different, not just occupied, but truly alive. And when he finally went to sleep that night, it was to the sound of Emmy whispering a story to her new teddy bear in the next room. It was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. The next morning, Nate woke up to a sound he hadn't heard in a long time, laughter echoing through the house. Emmy was in the hallway, chatting excitedly with her teddy bear as if it could answer back. "Good morning, Mr. Bear. Today we're going to explore the whole castle." Nate smiled, putting on his robe. Castle. That's how she saw his apartment. When he reached the living room, he found Emmy on the balcony, pointing at the buildings below. "Look, Uncle Nate. In the daytime, you can see even farther." Uncle Nate. Something warm spread through his chest when he heard those words. "Good morning, Princess. Did you sleep well on your cloud?" "Better than a real princess." Emmy skipped over to him. "Mommy said you were very kind to let us stay. You can stay as long as you want." Amber appeared from the kitchen, wearing one of the t-shirts he had bought. She looked rested for the first time since he'd met her. "Good morning," she said shyly. "I hope you don't mind, but I made coffee." "Of course I don't mind." Nate took a deep breath. There was a lovely smell coming from the kitchen. "In fact, thank you." After breakfast, simple scrambled eggs that tasted like a feast, Nate had an idea. "Emmy, you said you like to draw, right?" "I love to draw, but I don't have any paper. How about we go buy some things for you to draw with?" Emmy's eyes lit up like fireworks. Really and truly. At the art supply store, Emmy stood frozen in front of the colored pencil section. There were boxes with 12 colors, 24, 48, some even with 64 different colors. "How many can I choose?" she asked, whispering as if she were in a church. "As many as you want. Really. Really." Emmy chose the box of 48 colors, holding it as if it were made of diamonds. Nate also grabbed several notebooks, some with blank pages, others with lines, one with thicker paper, especially for drawing. "And pens, and markers, and crayons?" Emmy asked, pointing to each item with ever-widening eyes. "Everything," Nate laughed. "Get whatever you want." On the way back home, Emmy couldn't stop talking about what she was going to draw first. "I'm going to draw our family, and the pretty house, and the orange cat from the park, and clouds, lots of clouds." "Our family?" Nate repeated, curious. "Of course, you, me, and Mommy. We're a family now, aren't we?" Amber looked at him over Emmy's head, an unreadable expression on her face. Nate felt something tighten in his chest, not discomfort, but an emotion he couldn't name. "Yes, we are," he replied, and saw Emmy's smile light up the entire car. Arriving home, Emmy immediately settled at the living room table with her new treasures. Nate and Amber watched as she meticulously organized each pencil by color, then by shade. "First, I need to plan," she explained seriously. "Mommy always says it's important to have a plan." The first drawing was of the view from the window, buildings represented by colorful rectangles, a blue sky with fluffy white clouds, and small dots representing people on the streets. "This is our castle," she said, pointing to a taller building she had colored yellow. "And these are all the people who live in the city. I bet some of them are lonely too, just like we were." The girl's simple observation made Nate pause. How many people in that city were looking out their windows, wishing they had someone to share their meals with? "Well, can I hang this on the fridge?" Emmy asked when she finished. "Of course, in fact, you can hang your drawings anywhere you want." and she took that literally. In the following days, Emmy's drawings began to appear all over the house. On the refrigerator, a drawing of the family, 3 stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. On the hallway wall, a drawing of the orange cat from the park, so chubby it looked like a furball. In Nate's office, a drawing of him at the computer, but with a much bigger smile than he usually had. "Why did you draw me smiling so much?" he asked, looking at the paper. "Because that's how you look when you're with us," Emmy answered simply. Every morning, Nate would wake up and find new drawings. Emmy was a tireless little artist. She drew what she saw, what she felt, what she dreamed. Clouds that looked like animals, flowers that had faces, houses with hearts in the windows. But it was on one specific morning that something changed completely. Nate came downstairs for breakfast and stopped halfway down the stairs. There was a smell in the air he hadn't smelled in years. It wasn't just food, it was the smell of home. Bacon frying, fresh coffee, something baking in the oven. In the kitchen, he found Amber with her hair in a ponytail, wearing a makeshift apron made from a dish towel. She was at the stove, stirring eggs in a pan while slices of toast waited on a tray. "You did this?" he asked, still half in shock. Amber turned, her cheeks slightly flushed. "I thought I could give back a little. I hope you don't mind." "Mind?" Nate took another deep breath, letting the wonderful smell envelop all his senses. "Farf, this house hasn't smelled like home in a long time." The smile she gave him was different from all the others. Not shy, not grateful, genuinely happy. Emmy is getting dressed. She insisted on making orange juice, the special way. "The special way, with lots of love mixed in," Amber laughed. According to her, it's the secret ingredient. When they sat down to eat, Nate realized how many small details made a difference. The sound of silverware touching the plates, the noise of the kettle on the stove, Emmy telling a story about a dream she'd had with unicorns that made cupcakes. It was simple food, scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice, but it touched him in a way that dinners at expensive restaurants never could. "Is it good?" Amber asked, watching him eat. "It's perfect," Nate replied, and it was true. From that day on, Amber started cooking regularly. Not every day, she still hesitated, as if unsure if she was welcome, but often enough for the house to start having different routines. Breakfast at 8, when everyone was ready. Emmy always woke up first and ran to show the drawing she had finished the night before. Amber would make coffee while Nate checked emails, but now he did it at the kitchen table, participating in the morning conversations. "Uncle Nate, did you know that clouds are made of tiny little droplets?" Emmy asked one morning while drawing another of her famous clouds. "I didn't know that. How did you find that out?" "Mommy told me." "She knows a lot of things." Nate looked at Amber, who was making toast. "Where did you learn so much?" "I was studying to be a teacher," she replied softly. Before everything changed." "You can still be one," Nate said. "Maybe one day." But there was hope in her voice now, something that hadn't been there when they first met. Meals became special moments. Emmy always had stories to tell, about the drawings she had made, about the dreams from the night before, about the people she saw on the street and the lives she imagined for them. "That lady who wears colorful dresses probably has a garden full of flowers," she would say. "And the man who always reads the newspaper on the bench must have a cat that likes to sit on his lap." Nate began to contribute his own stories. He talked about his childhood, about the parents he had lost early, about how he had built his company. Amber shared memories from when she was a child, funny stories about Emmy as a baby. "She was always an artist," Amber recounted. "When she was 2, she drew on the living room wall with a crayon. I was mad at the time, but then I realized it was a beautiful sunset." "Do you still have the drawing?" Emmy asked, excited. Amber's face fell. "It was in our old house. We lost everything when—" "It's okay," Emmy interrupted in climbing onto her mother's lap. "Now I can make new drawings, even better ones." It was in these moments that Nate realized how much they had changed his life. The house had sounds now, laughter, conversations, music that Amber played softly while she cooked. Emmy would hum as she drew, making up songs about the colors she was using. Blue like the sky, green like the grass, yellow like the sun that loves us. One afternoon, while Emmy was drawing on the coffee table and Amber was reading a book Nate had lent her, he allowed himself to observe the scene. The golden late afternoon light streamed through the windows, illuminating Emmy's brown hair as she concentrated on the paper. Amber was curled up on the sofa, completely absorbed in her reading. It was a simple domestic scene, but to Nate, it seemed miraculous. "I've always imagined what it would be like to have kids," he said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could think about them. Amber looked up from her book. Emmy stopped drawing. "But I never had someone who wanted to stay," he continued, looking at his own hands. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that happens when important truths are spoken. Emmy got up from the table and walked over to him. Without a word, she rested her head on his shoulder. Nate felt his heart clench, not with sadness, but with something much more powerful. "We want to stay," Emmy murmured against his shoulder. "Don't we, Mommy?" Amber slowly closed her book. Her eyes were shining. "Yes, we do." There, in that simple moment, Emmy leaning on his shoulder, Amber looking at him with that affectionate expression, colorful drawings scattered on the table, the smell of dinner being prepared in the kitchen, Nate felt something being born inside him. It wasn't romantic passion, although there was something growing between him and Amber. It wasn't just friendship, although they were friends. It was something bigger, stronger, more permanent. It was family. "Then stay," he said simply. "Forever?" Emmy asked, lifting her head to look at him. Nate looked at Amber, searching for any sign of hesitation. He found only hope. "Forever," he confirmed. Emmy jumped with joy and ran to get her colored pencils. "I'm going to draw our new family, with giant hearts all around." While she drew, Nate and Amber sat in silence, processing what had just happened. There was no marriage proposal, no dramatic declarations, but there was a promise being made, a commitment being undertaken. "Are you sure?" Amber asked softly. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life, even without really knowing us." "I know what matters," Nate replied. "I know the incredible mother you are. I know the special child Emmy is. I know how I feel when I wake up and hear laughter in the house." Emmy ran back with her new drawing. It was the three of them holding hands, under a sun with a huge smile. Around them, red and pink hearts floated like balloons. "Done," she announced. "Our official family." "It's perfect," Nate said, and it really was. That night, after Emmy had gone to bed, Nate found another drawing stuck to the refrigerator door. It was him, Amber, and Emmy in a house, not a high-rise apartment, but a house with a garden, trees, and a white picket fence. In the corner, written in crooked letters, was "Our Forever Home." Nate stared at the drawing for a long time. It was the future through the eyes of a 5-year-old, and for the first time in his life, a future he truly wanted. The call came on a Tuesday morning, interrupting the breakfast that had become sacred for the three of them. Nate looked at the caller ID and sighed. "It's work," he said to Amber, who was serving pancakes to Emmy. "I have to take this." "Go ahead, Uncle Nate," Emmy said with her mouth full. "We'll wait for you to finish the dragon story." The call lasted 15 minutes, and when Nate returned to the table, his expression had changed. "I have to travel," he announced, sitting down heavily in his chair. "A client in Chicago is in serious trouble. I'll have to be there for 3 or 4 days." "It's okay," Amber replied quickly, but Nate noticed the tension that appeared in her shoulders. "You'll stay here, of course. The house is yours too." "Of course," she repeated, but she didn't look him in the eye. Emmy, oblivious to the tension between the adults, continued eating her pancakes. "Are you going on a plane?" "I'll draw a plane for you to take." "I am, Princess, and I'd love to take your drawing." Nate left the next day, carrying in his briefcase a drawing from Emmy, a blue airplane with smiling clouds around it. During the ride to the airport, he called home twice, once to confirm they were okay, another to remind Amber where the emergency numbers were. "They'll be fine," he muttered to himself in the airport terminal. "It's just a work trip." But there was something in the way Amber said goodbye that left him uneasy. In Chicago, Nate tried to focus on the client's problems, a family business on the brink of bankruptcy due to mismanagement, but his mind constantly wandered back home. He called every night to talk to Emmy, who excitedly recounted the new drawings she had made and the stories her mom had invented. Mommy made up a story about a princess who lived on a cloud, Emmy told him on the first night, and the princess had a castle just like ours. That's cool, and is Mommy okay? She's fine, but she looks out the window sometimes. I think she misses you. On the second night, Emmy was quieter. Is everything okay there, princess? Everything's fine, just when are you coming back exactly? The day after tomorrow. Why? No reason, just wanted to know. On the third night, it was Amber who answered the phone. How are you two? Nate asked. We're fine. Emmy's sleeping. She seemed a little off yesterday. Did something happen? A long pause. No. She just misses you. And you? Another pause. Me too. But there was something in her voice, a distance that Nate couldn't interpret. Amber, is everything really okay? Yes, it is. You need to focus on work. We'll see you when you get back. The phone clicked off, leaving Nate with a bad feeling in his stomach. On the other side of the city, Amber stood by the phone for a long time. The house was too quiet without Nate. During the day, she could keep herself busy, cooking, cleaning, playing with Emmy. But at night, when Emmy was asleep, the thoughts came like a flood. What was she doing here, living in a fantasy that couldn't last forever? Amber walked to the living room window, looking at the city lights. 3 weeks. They had been in Nate's house for 3 weeks, living like a family, pretending it was real. But it wasn't real. Nate had a life, responsibilities, a routine that existed long before they appeared. And them. They were a parenthesis, a good deed that had lasted longer than it should have. He has a life, she murmured to herself, and we just passed through it. The sentence echoed in the empty room, gaining weight with each repetition. Nate would come back from Chicago and realize he had committed to responsibilities he hadn't chosen. A woman with financial problems and a child that wasn't his. He would get tired of the domestic routine, the drawings on the walls, the constant noise. Amber had seen it before. David had been affectionate at the beginning too. Before the drinks, before the debts, before she became a burden. She couldn't let it happen again. Not with Nate. He had been too kind to deserve the weight of her problems. The next day, Amber woke up with a decision made. Emmy, she called softly, sitting on her daughter's bed. We need to talk. Good morning, Mommy. I dreamed that Uncle Nate came back and brought ice cream for everyone. What a beautiful dream, sweetie. But, Mommy was thinking, maybe it's time for us to go. Emmy sat up in bed immediately. Go, but why? Don't we like it here anymore? We love it here, but Uncle Nate has his own life and we can't stay forever. But he said we could stay. He promised. Amber felt her heart ache. Sometimes people say things they can't keep, not because they're bad, but because it's complicated. I don't understand. Tears began to well up in Emmy's eyes. I like it here. I like Uncle Nate. Why do we have to go? Because sometimes it's better to leave before people get tired of us. Emmy was silent for a moment, processing. Then she asked, with a wisdom that broke Amber's heart, Did Daddy David get tired of us? Amber pulled her daughter into a hug. No, sweetie. Daddy David was sick. It was different. And is Uncle Nate going to get sick too? No, Emmy. But it's better if we leave before things change. It took 2 hours to convince Emmy, and Amber had to lie several times, saying they had found a new house, that it would be a new adventure, that they could visit Nate sometimes. Necessary lies to break her own daughter's heart. Amber quickly packed their few belongings before she lost her nerve. The clothes Nate had bought, some of Emmy's drawings, the teddy bear. She left behind most of the drawings that decorated the house. They belonged to that place, to those moments. On the kitchen table, where they had breakfast every morning, she left a note. Nate, thank you for everything. It was more than I ever dreamed of. You gave us a home when we needed it most, and that's a gift we'll never forget. But it's time for us to go. You have a beautiful life ahead of you, and we don't want to get in the way of that. Emmy will miss you. I will too. But she understands that sometimes people need to go their separate ways. Take care. You deserve all the happiness in the world. Amber and Emmy. Amber reread the note 3 times before she could leave it on the table. Every word was a lie disguised as protection. "Are we ready, Mommy?" Emmy asked from the doorway, carrying her small backpack and the teddy bear. "We are. Can I leave a drawing for Uncle Nate?" Amber nodded, not trusting her own voice. Emmy ran to the fridge and pulled off one of the drawings, the one of the family holding hands under the smiling sun. She wrote something on the back with a red-colored pencil. "Done," she said, placing the paper next to the note. They left the apartment without looking back. In the elevator, Emmy asked, "Will we come back one day?" "Maybe," Amber lied one more time. 2 hours later, Nate landed at the city airport, eager to get home. The meeting had ended earlier than expected, and he had managed to catch an earlier flight. In the taxi, he called home. No one answered. "They must be at the park," he muttered to himself. But when the key turned in the lock and the door opened, Nate knew immediately that something was wrong. The silence. It was the same silence as before. The silence he had forgotten how heavy it was. No laughter echoing through the hallways. No soft music coming from the kitchen. No sound of colored pencils falling on the floor. "Amber," he called out, knowing there would be no answer. "Emmy." He walked through the house like a ghost. Emmy's room was too tidy, too empty. Amber's room had the bed made with military precision. In the kitchen, he found the note. Nate read it once, then again, then one more time. The words danced on the page, not making sense. "It's time for us to go. You have a beautiful life ahead of you. We don't want to get in the way of that." Next to the note, Emmy's drawing. Nate turned it over and read the message written in red pencil. "For Uncle Nate, thank you for being my heart daddy. I love you forever. Emmy." Nate sat down heavily in the chair where he had breakfast with them every morning. The table was too clean, too organized, as if they had never existed, but he knew they had existed, because now, without them, the house wasn't just silent, it was dead. Nate looked around the kitchen where Amber had cooked, where Emmy had laughed, where they had built something he didn't even know he was looking for, and he realized a truth that hit him like a punch. They hadn't just passed through his life, they were his life, and now they were gone. Nate sat in the kitchen for an hour, just staring at the note. Amber's words echoed in his mind like a painful refrain. "It's time for us to go." As if the time they spent together had an expiration date he didn't know about. He reread Emmy's message on the back of the drawing until he had memorized every crooked letter. "Thank you for being my heart daddy, heart daddy." Nate stood up abruptly, knocking over the chair. He couldn't let it end like this, not when he had finally found something that made sense. He grabbed his car keys and left the apartment, with no clear destination in mind, only the certainty that he had to find them. He drove through the city streets like a man possessed. He checked the park where Emmy liked to see the orange cat. He passed the Italian restaurant where it all began. He searched every public bench, every bus stop, every place where 2 homeless people might be. Nothing. The afternoon turned into evening, and Nate began to feel desperation growing in his chest. What if they had left the city? What if they had gone too far for him to find? It was when he stopped at a traffic light near the Italian restaurant that he had an idea. The place where it all started. If Amber chose a place to stay, it would be there. Where they had met. Where Emmy had asked that question that changed everything. Will this ever change? Nate parked and walked slowly down the sidewalk. The night was cool, and the street was busier than the first time he saw them there. People coming home from work, couples having dinner, life happening all around. And then he saw them, sitting on the same low wall where Emmy had been swinging her legs that first night. Amber had her arm around her daughter, and both were looking at the street traffic with a sadness that broke Nate's heart. Emmy was the first to see him. Her eyes went wide, and for a moment she was still, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "Uncle Nate," she whispered. Then she jumped off the wall and ran to him, throwing herself into his arms with such force that she almost knocked him over. "You came for us," she cried, clinging to his neck as if she would never let go. "I knew you would come. I told Mommy you would come." Nate held her tightly, feeling tears burn his eyes. "Of course I came. Of course I came, Princess." Amber approached slowly, her face a mixture of relief and shame. Nate, I can explain. You don't have to explain, he said, still holding Emmy. I understand. No, you don't understand. The words tumbled out. We can't stay. You have a life. Responsibilities. You can't take on the problems of strangers just because... Strangers, Nate interrupted her, finally putting Emmy down but keeping a hand on her shoulder. You think you're strangers to me? Amber looked away. We are. You've known us for a few weeks. That's not enough to... To what? To care. To feel like my life only makes sense when I wake up and hear Emmy singing in the hallway, to discover that home-cooked food tastes like family. Nate, let me finish. He stepped closer. When I got home today and found that note, do you know what I felt? Emmy looked at him with full attention, as if every word was important. I didn't feel relief to have my life back. I felt like my life was over. Amber closed her eyes, as if his words were too painful to hear. You wrote that I have a beautiful life ahead of me, but you don't understand. You are my beautiful life. You are what I was looking for without knowing I was looking. But we're a burden, Amber whispered. You'll get tired of... I don't want you to pass through my life, Nate said firmly, looking directly into her eyes. I want you to stay. Emmy squeezed his hand tightly. Forever. Forever. He knelt beside her. Emmy is my daughter in my heart. You don't need papers or documents for it to be real. Emmy smiled through her tears. And I love you like you're my real daddy. Nate stood up and looked at Amber, who was crying silently. And you... He paused, searching for the right words. You are the home I've been waiting for. The silence that followed was different from all the others, not empty but full of possibilities. I'm scared, Amber admitted softly. Scared of messing it all up. Scared you'll realize we're too much. Scared Emmy will get attached and then what? Then I'll change my mind. Nate gently took her hands. Amber, look at me. She lifted her eyes, and he saw all the fear there. Not just fear of the present, but fear carried from the past. Of broken promises, of people who left, of shattered hopes. I'm not David, he said simply. Amber sobbed, because that was exactly what she needed to hear. I'm not going to get tired of you. I'm not going to wake up one day and decide you're inconvenient. You aren't guests in my life. You are my life. But what if... There is no what if. Nate wiped the tears from her face with his thumb. There is only when Emmy starts school, when she loses her first tooth, when you decide if you want to go back to school, when we build enough memories to fill a lifetime. Emmy jumped between them, hugging them both. Does this mean we're going home? This means we're a family, Nate replied. For real, Emmy asked. For real family? The realest there is. Amber finally smiled through her tears. Are you sure? Because after we say yes, we're not leaving again. You'll have to put up with drawings on the fridge forever. And stories at dinner time, Emmy added. And music in the kitchen in the morning, Amber continued. And someone always asking if you've eaten properly, Emmy laughed. And arguments about which movie to watch on the weekend, Amber said. And fights about bedtime, Emmy grimaced. Nate laughed, the sound echoing down the street. I want all of it. Every drawing, every story, every silly argument. I want it all. Amber held out her hand, and when he took it, it was as if something clicked into place. Not dramatic, not explosive, but right, like a key finding its lock. Then let's go home, she said. Home, Nate agreed. They walked to the car together, Emmy swinging between them, held by both their hands. Their bags felt light now, not because they carried little, but because they knew they had a place to put everything. Uncle Nate? Emmy asked when they were in the car. Yes, Princess. Can I draw our new family when we get home? You can draw as many families as you want. I'm going to draw a different one every day, so we never forget how good it is to be a family. In the front seat, Amber held Nate's hand as he drove. It was a simple touch, but it was loaded with promises. When they got to the building, Emmy ran ahead to press the elevator button. 23rd floor, she announced to the doorman, who smiled. Welcome back, the man said, and it was true. They were coming back. Not as guests, not as temporary visitors, but as part of something real. When the apartment door opened, Emmy ran straight to her room. "I'm going to check if my teddy bear missed me." Nate and Amber stood in the entryway, looking at the house that had become a home. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you," he replied, "for teaching me what family is." And when Emmy yelled from her room, the teddy bear was crying because he missed me, but now he's happy. They both knew they were exactly where they belonged. The Saturday after they returned, Nate woke up with a mission. Over the past few days, he had watched Emmy play with her one teddy bear and Amber wear the same 3 t-shirts in rotation. They had the essentials, but they didn't truly have things that were their own. "I'm going out for a bit," he announced after breakfast. "Important things to do." "Can I come with you?" Emmy asked, licking jam from her fingers. "Not today, Princess. It's a surprise." Emmy pouted. "I don't like surprises. They make me nervous." Nate knelt beside her. "What kind of surprises make you nervous?" "The bad surprises, like when Daddy David said he had a surprise and then yelled at Mommy." Nate's heart ached. Those weren't real surprises, they were lies. Real surprises are good things we do because we love someone. Like presents. Like making someone's special room even more special. Emmy's eyes lit up. "Are you going to make my room more special?" "I'm going to make your room perfect for a princess who draws clouds." In the first store, Nate found himself lost amidst aisles of children's clothes. Our saleswoman approached, smiling. "Can I help you? I need clothes for a 5-year-old girl, everything, from the basics to," he paused, thinking, "to clothes for a princess who likes to draw." "How sweet. Is it for your daughter?" The word hit him like a lightning bolt. "It is. For my daughter." 2 hours later, Nate left the store carrying bags full of colorful dresses, comfortable pants, t-shirts with animal prints, soft pajamas, socks with funny patterns, and a pink coat that the saleswoman guaranteed every 5-year-old girl would love. In the toy store, he went slower. He observed each aisle, imagining what would make Emmy smile. Dolls that seemed to have personalities, building sets for creative minds, books with colorful illustrations, puzzles with landscapes she would love. "For what age?" asked another salesman. 5 years old. She likes to draw, to make up stories, to ask questions about everything. A little artist. We have a special section." The special section had drawing tables, small easels, paints, brushes, different kinds of notebooks, and even a kit for making her own illustrated stories. "I'll take it all," Nate said, without hesitation. For Amber, it was harder. He didn't know her tastes as well, but he knew she liked to read. He had seen how her eyes lit up when she browsed the books on his shelf. At the bookstore, he chose novels, biographies, cookbooks, and some on child education that he thought she might find interesting. In the women's clothing store, he felt even more lost. An older saleswoman with a motherly air came to his rescue. "Is this for your wife?" Nate hesitated. "For someone very special. She's a mother, smart, strong. She's been through some hard times recently." "I understand. Let's find things that will make her feel beautiful again." Comfortable but elegant clothes. Soft sweaters, well-fitting pants, simple but pretty dresses. Nothing extravagant, but all good quality. Clothes that said, "You deserve nice things." Back at the apartment, Nate found Amber and Emmy in the living room. Emmy was drawing while Amber read one of the books from his shelf. "He's here." Emmy jumped up. "Where's my surprise?" "Patience, Princess. First, I need to get everything ready." Nate took the bags to Emmy's room and closed the door. For the next 3 hours, he transformed the space. He organized the new clothes in the closet, arranged by color and type. He put the books on a low shelf where she could reach them herself. He assembled the drawing table near the window, where the natural light was best. He had also bought a soft rug with cloud patterns, curtains that let the light in gently, and some colorful pillows for the floor. On the wall, he hung a corkboard where she could put her favorite drawings. When he finished, the room no longer looked like a guest room. It looked like the room of a beloved child. In Amber's room, he was more discreet. He organized the new clothes in the closet, placed the books on a table beside the bed, and replaced the towels with softer ones. Nothing dramatic, but all thoughtfully done. "Done!" he announced, returning to the living room. Emmy ran to the room and stopped at the door. speechless. "It's a real princess room." She entered slowly, touching each thing as if it were magic. The cloud rug, the drawing table, the books at the perfect height. "Is all this mine?" she asked, whispering. "All yours." Emmy threw herself into his arms. "You're the best daddy in the whole world." "Daddy." The word echoed in Nate's heart like a bell. Amber appeared at the door and watched in silence. Nate noticed she was emotional but trying to hide it. "Amber, your room too." "You didn't have to," she said softly. "You've already done too much." "No, I haven't. I did what any father and any man who cares would do." She nodded, not trusting her voice. In the following days, Nate watched as small changes transformed the dynamic of the house. Emmy spent hours at the drawing table, creating entire worlds with her new pencils. Amber read before bed, and Nate would sometimes hear her turning pages late into the night. But what touched him most was how he felt taking care of them. For years, he had taken care of companies, of investments, of numbers on spreadsheets, important but abstract things. Now he was taking care of real lives. He checked if Emmy was warm enough, if Amber was eating well, if they were both happy. It was a completely different kind of responsibility, and for the first time, he felt he was doing something that truly mattered. "You're different," Amber commented one night as they washed dishes together. "Different how?" "More light, as if you found something you were looking for." Nate slowly dried a plate, thinking, "I think that's exactly it. I spent years building a life that looked right on paper, but was empty inside. And now I wake up in the morning, and I know why I'm waking up." One particularly quiet afternoon, Emmy was organizing her drawings in a pile on the living room floor. She had so many that she had created a system: family, animals, clouds, home. "Uncle Nate, can you help me choose which ones go on my bedroom board?" Nate sat on the floor beside her, flipping through the drawings. There were some new ones he hadn't seen. One of him reading the newspaper on the sofa, one of Amber cooking, one of the three of them watching TV together. "These are beautiful, Emmy. You draw our life." "It's because it's a happy life," she said simply. Drawings of happy lives turn out prettier. They were choosing when Emmy stopped and looked at him with that seriousness that sometimes took hold of her. "Uncle Nate, can I ask an important question?" "Of course." "Are you going to be my daddy forever? For real forever?" Nate felt his heart race. He knew this moment would come, but he wasn't prepared for the intensity of the question. He knelt on the floor and held her small hands in his. "If you want me to," he said slowly, choosing each word, "I want to be your dad from now on. And I promise you'll get to study, play, and grow up with everything you deserve." Emmy studied him for a moment, as if measuring the weight of his words. "And you won't change your mind? Even if I make a mess? Even if I cry sometimes? Even if I ask too many questions? Especially because of those things," Nate smiled. "Because that's what daughters do. And that's what dads love." "Then I want you to," she said, throwing herself into his arms. "Yes, I do, Daddy. I already love you." "Daddy." Nate hugged her tightly, feeling tears burn his eyes. 29 years of life, and he had never felt anything as powerful as hearing that word directed at him. "I love you too, Princess. More than you can imagine." In the kitchen, Amber was preparing dinner when she heard the conversation. She stopped what she was doing and listened, her hands trembling slightly. This was it. The moment she had both feared and longed for. The moment Emmy would get a real father, someone who would stay, someone who would protect her. Tears began to stream slowly down Amber's face. Not tears of sadness, but of deep relief. Relief in knowing her daughter would have what she could never give her alone: stability, security, a father who would love her unconditionally. For the first time since David's death, for the first time since they lost everything, Amber allowed herself to trust completely. To trust that this time would be different. To trust that Nate wasn't just a kind man passing through their lives, but someone who had chosen to stay. To trust without fear. When Nate appeared in the kitchen a few minutes later, carrying Emmy in his arms, Amber tried to hide that she had been crying. "Is everything okay?" he asked, noticing her red eyes. "It's perfect," she replied. And it was true. Mommy, Uncle Nate. Daddy Nate is going to be my daddy forever. Amber smiled, looking at Nate over Emmy's head. We're so lucky, aren't we? Our luck, Nate agreed, and in the way he said our, Amber knew he wasn't just talking about Emmy. He was talking about all of them. That night, after Emmy went to sleep in her lovingly prepared room, after Amber retreated with a new book, Nate stood in the living room looking out the window. 3 months ago, he would look at that same view every night, feeling disconnected from the world below. Now he no longer needed to look outside for life. Life was right here inside, in the carefully prepared rooms, in the drawings on the fridge, in the soft sound of pages turning in the next room. It was in the word Daddy, spoken with absolute confidence, in the smile of a woman who finally allowed herself to believe that good things could last. For the first time in his life, Nate was taking care of something that truly mattered, not numbers or businesses, but 2 lives that had become as essential as breathing, and tomorrow he would wake up again knowing exactly why it was worth waking up. 6 months later, the morning arrived with the familiar sound of small bare feet running down the hallway. Emmy appeared in the kitchen already dressed in her school uniform, her hair in a slightly crooked ponytail she had tried to do herself. "Good morning, Daddy. Good morning, Mommy." Nate looked up from the laptop where he was checking emails. "Good morning, Princess. Did you manage the ponytail on your own today? Almost." "Mommy just had to fix it a little." Amber smiled from the sink where she was preparing breakfast. Soft music played on the radio, a jazz station that had become the soundtrack to their mornings. She danced discreetly as she stirred the eggs in the pan, a scene so mundane that Nate sometimes forgot how he had ever lived without it. "What's for breakfast today?" Emmy asked, climbing into her chair. "Scrambled eggs, toast and—" Amber built the suspense. "Special pancakes for presentation day." "Oh!" Emmy clapped her hands. "I almost forgot. Today I'm showing my project about family to the class." 3 weeks ago, the teacher had asked each child to prepare a presentation about their family. Emmy had worked on the project every night, choosing photos, drawing, telling stories. "Are you nervous?" Nate asked, sitting beside her. "A little bit, but Mrs. Martinez said that every family is different and special in its own way." "And how is our family special?" Amber asked, serving the pancakes. "Because it was chosen with the heart," Emmy answered seriously. "We weren't born together, but we chose each other." Nate felt that familiar tightening in his chest, the kind of emotion that still caught him by surprise, even after all these months. After breakfast, while Emmy brushed her teeth, Nate and Amber cleaned the kitchen together. It was a dance they had perfected over time. He rinsed and she dried, conversations flowing naturally. "Will you be able to leave early today?" Amber asked. "I'll try. I want to hear how the presentation went." "I'm ready." Emmy appeared, carrying her backpack and a folder with her project. On the way to school, she reviewed what she was going to say one more time. "First, I'm going to show the picture of when we met at the restaurant." "We don't have a picture of when we met," Nate reminded her. "I drew it. It looks pretty close. Then I'll tell them how you invited us to dinner, how Mommy cooks the best food in the world, and how you became my dad because you wanted to." "Because I wanted to," Nate repeated softly, liking the sound of the words. At school, Emmy said goodbye with loud kisses and ran into her classroom. Through the window, Nate saw her excitedly showing her project to her classmates. "She's happy," Amber observed. "She is, and you?" "I'm happy in a way I didn't even know existed." At 3 in the afternoon, Nate managed to leave the office early. In recent months, he had reorganized his schedule to spend more time at home. He discovered that being more efficient at work meant having more energy for the things that really mattered. When he got home, he found Emmy at the living room table doing her homework. Amber was in the kitchen preparing dinner, the usual low music playing on the radio. "Daddy!" Emmy ran to him. "Want to know how my presentation went?" "I want to know everything." "It was a success. The teacher said it was one of the most creative in the class." "I told them you're a dad who chose with his heart." "You really said that?" "I did, and I cried a little bit from happiness at the end." During dinner, Emmy recounted every detail of the presentation, how her classmates asked questions, how the teacher praised her drawing, how proud she felt talking about them. Tommy said our family is cool because you chose me on purpose. It wasn't an accident. It definitely wasn't an accident, Nate agreed. It was the opposite of an accident. It was destiny, Amber suggested. It was love, Emmy concluded simply. After dinner, while Emmy was taking a bath, Nate and Amber sat on the living room sofa. On the coffee table was a new picture frame that Amber had bought, a photo of the three of them taken at the park the previous weekend. Under the photo, Emmy had taped one of her drawings with the phrase written in colorful letters, "Now we are a family." "When did you buy this?" Nate asked, picking up the picture frame. "Today, after the presentation. I thought it was time to make it official. Official. Our story, our family, everything we've built." Amber snuggled up beside him. "We don't need a ceremony or documents. We just needed this certainty." Nate looked at the photo. They were smiling. Not the posed smile of formal photos, but the natural smile of genuinely happy people. Emmy was in the middle, with her arms around both of them. It looked like a family that had grown up together for years. Emmy appeared in the hallway in her pajamas, hair wet and teddy bear under her arm. "Can I watch TV with you guys for a little bit?" "Of course, princess." She squeezed between them on the sofa automatically and naturally. Nate put an arm around her. Amber did the same on the other side. The TV was on a silly sitcom, but none of them were paying much attention. "You know what Mrs. Martinez told me today?" Emmy commented during the commercials. "What?" "That some families start with babies, others start with choices, and that both are equally real." "She's right," Amber said. "And you know what else she said? Tell us." "That love is when you want to take care of someone forever, and they want to take care of you too." The room fell silent for a moment, but it wasn't the empty silence Nate knew from before. It was the comfortable silence of people who knew exactly where they belonged. "Daddy," Emmy whispered, starting to get sleepy. "Yes, thank you for choosing us. Thank you for letting me choose you." Later, after Emmy had gone to bed, Nate and Amber sat in the living room looking at the picture frame. The house was quiet, but not empty. It was the kind of quiet that comes after a day full of life, of laughter, of small important moments. "Sometimes it still feels surreal," Amber confessed. "Like I'm going to wake up and find out it was all a very good dream." "It wasn't a dream," Nate pulled her closer. "It was the realest thing that's ever happened to me." She nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. "Emmy was right today. Now we are a family." "We always were," he replied, "ever since that first night at the restaurant. It just took us a while to realize it. There was no fanfare in that moment, no dramatic declarations or solemn promises, just two adults and a child who had found each other at the exact moment they needed each other most." In the picture frame, three people smiled. In the drawing underneath, simple words declared a profound truth: "Now we are a family." And in the silent living room of that 23rd floor apartment, where once only loneliness had lived, now lived something much more powerful. Love had found a home, and it had the quiet certainty that it would stay forever. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like, because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.